room that never sleeps. The first thing Lena noticed was the room's refusal to be ordinary. It wasn't loud, nothing in room 7 shouted, but an attentive hush lived inside the wallpaper's pattern, and behind the slow, stubborn tick of the wall clock. She arrived with a suitcase and a list of compromises, more tired than afraid, needing a place cheap enough to hold her when the night stretched. At dusk, the window threw an indifferent wash of streetlight across a mattress and a closet door bolted with a tiny padlock. The air smelled of lemon and dust, like a memory half cleaned. When she closed the door, the room seemed to inhale. The landlord's smile was practiced and too quick. Mr. Hallow looked like someone who catalogued things by habit, which tenants left and which stayed, which rooms sighed and which held their breath. He handed her a simple lease, then tipped his head toward the padlocked closet as if he had offered an apology instead of a detail. "Cheap rent," he said, "but the building keeps its own hours." Lena laughed once to dismiss the chill that tracked the phrase. She smoothed the wallpaper and set down a notebook. Small acts that called the room into order, measures against a growing, delicate unease. Nights became a series of small betrayals. Lena slept in thin stages and woke to discover things shifted, as if someone had leaned over her while she dozed. A book moved a finger's breadth, the curtain tied in a knot it had not borne. Once, she found a single word traced on the mirror in fog: stay, each letter reluctant and patient. Her first reasonable thought blamed her thumb, the warm imprint of breath on glass after a long night. Later, she scratched at the mirror with a key. The glass gave no blood and held the word as if it had learned how to keep messages for itself. She tried patterns like charms, bringing a lamp with a strong bulb, leaving the radio playing soft static, drawing a grid of notes in her notebook to mark hours and moods. These small defenses offered short relief. The lamp would catch on a rhythm of its own, flickering twice and pausing at the precise moment her heart thudded in her throat. The radio hummed with a frequency that settled under her skin and seemed to answer questions she hadn't asked. Control thinned at the edges. The room replied to rituals by learning them, folding Lena's habits into something that waited. Sounds arrived like fingerprints, the soft pacing behind the plaster at 3 a.m, the careful shift of furniture somewhere within the walls, a laughter looped and unreadable. Lena pressed her ear to the wallpaper and heard what felt like records of other nights, voices saying numbers, someone singing a lullaby that wasn't hers, the scrape of a chair repeated as if a rehearsal were going on inside the building's bones. She knocked on the wall and found only solid wood. The echoes, however, were not hollow. They had weight and knowing. One afternoon, Mr. Hallow reappeared with an apology wrapped in habit. He set a small brass key on her table, a tiny dot stamped into its head. "For the closet," he said simply, as if naming gravity or weather. His hands were clean, his smile held too steady. "People leave things behind," he added, and it sounded like a ledger entry. Lena felt a small rebellion. She turned the key in her fingers and felt, for the first time, the object hum faintly. It was a private, mechanical purr that slipped under her skin and refused to be shrugged off. The closet yielded a coat moth-eaten and heavy with other people's shapes, and beneath its folds, a dented music box missing its lid. Inside lay folded scraps of paper, neat and older than anyone's current memory. Each note was a small confession or a mark of nights counted. I could not sleep. I listened until it knew my name, one that broke mid-ink, as if the writer had been interrupted. The handwriting changed decade by decade, different hands learning the same shorthand of unrest. The last note was blank, except for a date that matched the month she moved in. Leaving became an exercise in small sabotage. Missing buses that pulled away when she rounded the corner by seconds. Phone batteries that died in the exact moment she decided to call a friend. A taxi driver who swore his meter would not move though the city throbbed beyond the glass. Time lengthened like a rubber band inside room 7. Appointments blurred into halves, and numbers slid on the face of her watch. Outside clocks read hours. She had no memory of living. The room did not lock her physically, but it rearranged minutes until the pattern fit its appetite. She turned to a recorder, the kind with a spinning tape she remembered from childhood. That night, the machine caught layers of the room, static like weather, a low hum beneath the walls, and then a voice that started humming a lullaby she only knew through an aunt's vague recollection. Then, impossible, her own voice asked a question she had not spoken aloud. The tape's end held a breath that was too close and too practiced to be hers alone. Playing it back, Lena felt the hair at the base of her neck lift, as if the room had become the orchestra, and she was merely an instrument. She tested the mirror by speaking directly, claiming the space as if sealing a bargain. The glass returned her image a breath late. A twitched smile broadened as if someone on the other side understood a private joke. Lena raised a hand slowly, and the reflection hesitated, then made a small movement she had never practiced, tilting its head, as if listening to a note only it could hear. She struck the mirror with the handle of a spoon. The glass did not break. It held the delayed gesture, and after a measured interval, returned her anger with precise mimicry. On a night without power, the building became a cathedral of small noises. The hallway's darkness amplified the soft counting that moved through the walls. 1, 2, a pause like a ledger being tallied slowly with a practiced hand. Lena whispered a command enough into the dark. A voice answered from the closet, close and flat. Not yet. She opened the door expecting a person or a trick of curtains. Inside was only a plain socket, the metal warm as if it had been waiting and awake. The voice was not in the room so much as it was in the act of being counted. At dawn, she walked out with the music box and the folded notes inside a paper bag, each scrap like a fossil of someone who had learned to live with the room's attention. For a few hours, the city felt ordinary. Buses, conversations, a coffee cup warming her palm. A passerby glanced at the dotted key she had looped on a string and said, casual and too informed, "You got room 7's key. It never lets go." Lena laughed the laugh of someone wearing courage by habit, then sat at a cafe and unfolded the last paper. The handwriting was hers. The line read, "She left, but the room kept breathing." It ended there,